When I joined the army, my name was Valerie Blackett. I was 18 years and a few days, and my rank was gunner. I think we might have been some of the first. I went to Victoria Barracks. We had a pep talk, and then we all walked from Victoria Barracks down to Central Station. Looked like a gaggle of peacocks and things. Girls in high heels, some in flatties, some with hats, and everybody calling out, "You'll be sorry, you'll be sorry," all the way down to Central. And we went on the train to Ingleburn, where I did my rookies. And then we weren't told much and got on a train, and we got off at Broadmeadow onto a truck, standing up on the back of a truck, about 20 of us, crossing the ferry. The ferry in those days took trucks and cars. We pulled up outside a beautiful home called the Laurels, and we all said, "Oh, I'll have that room, I'll have that room." You know. We walked in through the hallway and out into a hut in the back garden, which was a rude awakening. So that was the first day that I realised I was going to be a gunner. My father had been in First World War on the Somme. I think he was pretty proud, you know, because he and 2 brothers and 5 first cousins all went to the First World War, and they were all gunners. When he found out I was a gunner too, it was just, he rang everybody he knew to tell them, yes. When we got to Wave Battery, the men were pretty aghast. They couldn't believe that women were coming in to do the same job. I think they complained a bit, and the CO promised them there would be no difference in the chores, so we did exactly the same as the men. We got a lot of respect for that too. We weren't treated as women. The first day we had a wonderful sergeant came to give us a bit of history, and he said, "You girls have got probably the most important job in the whole of Australia. You have to protect BHP and the port." And, you know, we all, you know, we're only girls. That little pep talk, I'd say the girls were 200% always. Their job came first. We had night after night on red alert, sitting in the concrete gun pit, not knowing whether it was planes or submarines, but everyone was ready to go, whatever he had to do. Wonderful spirit, and the most amazing lot of girls. From the first day, we were trained in the theory of gunnery, so we understood what we were doing and how gunnery works with the trajectory of the missile, and aircraft recognition. We could recognise any aircraft, and the theory of gunnery was all about mathematics. And I think I topped the class from the men and the women, and that caused a bit of a problem because some of the men said, I was 18 going on 12, and the men said, "Go back to kindergarten." And they were a bit peeved that maybe my maths was a bit fresher. Even though we were frightened, we knew what we knew was good. We did the technical work on what was called a height and range finder, which was a telescope with eyepieces on each end and what they called a predictor. We weren't supposed to photograph anything, and these have come to light lately. 4 girls were on the predictor, and we got the guns aligned to the target, and then we would call fire. The gun sergeant would order the gun to fire because we're on target. The aircraft pull a drag, what they called a drag, behind, and we fired at those. But we did the technical part, and the men loaded the shells and fired. There was an awful rumour went around that when Rathmines found out that it was the girls that were going to do it, every pilot turned in sick that morning. That's the rumour that went around, but we were so good at the job that they had nothing to worry about. We knew we wouldn't fire at their plane. We went for the drag. Where we were at Wave, we were right on the water. A worry for us because we were really anti-submarine. Instead of firing up, it was very difficult to fire down. The battery, before I arrived, they had taken part in the bombing of Newcastle that happened, that took out the West End. Absolute fear. I can't believe that you could live being so absolutely frightened. Most of that was from not knowing what we were up against, but we were so well trained that that wouldn't have interfered with anything. We spent a lot of time on the beach where we were camped, and we were surrounded by these tank traps with a barbed wire through them. We didn't do much swimming because you had to go through the barbed wire to get into the water. Under this sand here, 20 feet down was our command post. It was under the sand, and it went down 20 concrete steps, and our telephones and everything were underground. The difference at the fort, it's a completely different war. They had everything, all the amenities and so on, and we were just camped on the beach, really. We lived on the sand, we ate sand, we slept sand. One shower, 30 girls trying to get a shower together. And that was the funniest part of the day. Our relationship with Fort Scratchley, we knew that they were in charge of coastal defence. We didn't have much to do with them, except when they needed the shells polished. We would go, maybe 10 of us would go over and spend a day polishing shells and making sure they were all clean and so on. There was a bit of resentment, I think, because the fort was so beautiful and the girls had proper toilets and all sorts of things that we would have appreciated. And I don't think they did dirty things like cleaning the shells. We terrorised the shops in Stockton. We used to go down on a route march or something and all go and buy ice creams and try and get them for nothing, because 4 bob a day didn't buy much ice creams. That's the grocer's delivery van, and we commandeered it and went up and down the main street, all taking turns of being in it. And that's sitting in the main street of Stockton, outside the first house next to the shops. I'm on the end here. Everyone seemed to be nice. At the ferry wharf there was I think it was Red Cross, something. They had a tent there and they had hot meals for free. And we used to go and have mince on toast. That was probably the best meal of the week. Our meals were pretty terrible, mostly potatoes. And I lived on fruit mostly. One of the trawlers used to come in. I'd get a huge bag of prawns, which would take me 2 days to eat. I do know that I have received so much hospitality from locals, and I was the only one that took advantage of having a church pass every Sunday night, as long as I could get back in 5 minutes. And the people were just unbelievable. They'd turn up with boxes of homemade cakes for me to take back, and I just couldn't believe people were so absolutely wonderful to us. I loved Newcastle. Every 2 months, because they had the facility of the golf course with a most wonderful dance floor, and an orchestra, a band would come, and none of the men at Wave were given leave over that night, and all the girls had to go because Link only had men, so we used to go and dance. We did the jitterbug under the legs and over the shoulders. I've never seen dancing like it, and that was one of the highlights. Going up, standing on the back of a truck all. Well, if we had a Saturday night, we used to love to go to Newcastle Town Hall, where they had dancing every Saturday night, wonderful orchestra and waltzing competitions, and they would eliminate people until they got the best waltzes, which I won quite a few times. That was a wedding at the church in Stockton. Yeah, that's one of my favourite photos because they're all there. I remember the name of all of those. At Wave, there probably was 10 or 12 married, all successful, no divorces. I think the girls realised who the good fellows were. Everyone that got together, they ended up married and children and so on. Because we had a beautiful lot of men too. They were really lovely. Maybe the atmosphere of being at war and wanting to have something permanent and sustainable. And when they found someone that appealed to them, they really made it something special. I ended up at Fort Wallace, not till we broke up at Wave when they decommissioned that. They had 6-inch guns. They installed the first radar in Australia at Fort Wallace, and we were the ones that were chosen to do the course. So we did the course. Instead of looking out to sea, and there was Japanese shipping going up and down the coast, we'd see. Instead of looking at it, had our backs to it, looking at the screens, and we couldn't believe it, It was just, no one had ever thought of those kind of things. You've probably read, but I got a bullet wound to my head. I hadn't been there very long, but they had a boiler, which we called Bessie, for the hot water, and we were allocated jobs. And that day I was to keep the boiler going. And I was walking towards it and I heard an explosion, and then blood started to come. I thought, gosh, somebody must have thrown something, or catapult or something. Anyway, I went to the RAP and she said, oh, you've got a little round hole there. If it gives you any bother, here's a couple of Aspros. You can take those if it was any pain. There was a lot of pain. I took the Aspros overnight, and in the morning I had a black eye. And of course I thought I was Miss Australia, and the only thing that worried me is how I was going to look. So I got on a bus and I came down to Stockton to buy an eye patch to put over the black eye, and he said to me, "You'll have to buy two because the other one's going to be black as well." So the next day I had two eyes I could hardly see out of, but I was on duty the whole time, and I was on duty at the front gate with my .303 rifle. And I fainted in front of an officer, and he called an ambulance, and I went to Newcastle Hospital. They x-rayed it, and the doctor came out and said, "You've got a bullet in your head." So they wrote a report saying that there must have been a missile in the coke that goes into the boiler. And they brought in a surgeon to see if he could take the bullet out. Then they sent me to greet her. And when I got out of the ambulance, you walk through about 3 men's wards, and Miss Australia with 2 black eyes and big bandages and everything, and I was thinking, if only it had killed me, I've got to go through all this. And everyone saying, "How's the other fellow? What happened to him?" And in the back of the hospital was the women's ward, and the next morning, all the walking wounded men, some being pushed in wheelchairs, they were all down. "How are you?" And they'd all heard that I'd been shot. So, I became a hero overnight. After the operation, I told them when they were going to take the bandages off, so they're all there, and I said to the nurse, "Can we do it outside so they can see?" So she took the bandages off, and they were saying, "Oh, you're beautiful, marry me." I had 100 proposals of marriage on one day. I spent about 8 months in and out of hospital, and at the end of that time I was sent to Victoria Barracks, and I was there when the war ended. All of my friends have passed away, and I have this relationship with most of their daughters, and they're as close to me as their mothers were. We had an amazing lot of women, absolutely beautiful. I loved them all. And we kept in touch all the time. It was a wonderful experience. I think that was the nicest thing that came out of it.